All right, let's dive in. You ever get fascinated by those stories of secret societies? You know, the hidden groups, ancient wisdom, maybe pulling strings behind the scenes?
Absolutely. It's a huge draw.
Well, today we're looking at a name that just perfectly fits that mold. The Rosicrucians.
Right, a name that conjures up images of alchemy, deep secrets, maybe hidden influence.
Exactly. We're talking about a brotherhood that kind of exploded onto the scene in Europe centuries back, claiming they had access to, well, universal knowledge, and hinting at this big, transformative, maybe hidden agenda for humanity.
And it's interesting how their secrecy wasn't just maybe for protection. The theory suggests it was for deep concealment, right? They promised enlightenment, healing, a whole spiritual reformation of the world, but all wrapped up in this profound esoteric mystery.
Yeah, and our sources show that for centuries, their actual nature, who they really were, it stayed elusive, which of course just fuels all the speculation.
It certainly does.
And that's precisely what we're digging into today. This is our deep dive into the, frankly, quite unsettling Rosicrucian global control and suppressed knowledge conspiracy theory.
It's a big one.
It is. I mean, what if this ancient order, or maybe just some secret factions within it, what if they really did master forbidden knowledge? Things like, I don't know, advanced science we don't have, real alchemy, maybe even radical life extension.
And then the next step is, what if they use that power?
Exactly. Used it subtly to manipulate global events, control wealth, maybe guide history from the shadows, all while looking like, you know, just some mystical philosophers.
So that's the mission for this deep dive. We're going to try and unearth their historical emergence, which is fascinating in itself.
Right.
Then peel back the layers of the conspiracy, look at the chilling claims, the so-called evidence that proponents point to.
And then we need to ground ourselves, look at the mainstream counter-arguments, the debunking.
Definitely. And finally, maybe think about why. Why does a theory like this, so potent, so enduring, why does it resonate so deeply with us?
Okay, so let's start where it all began. The historical enigma, Rosicrucianism itself. Our sources say this really kicked off in Europe between 1614 and 1616.
Yeah, a very specific window.
With these anonymous publications, 3 really impactful manifestos. What were they?
Okay, so the first one, the Fama Fraternitatis Rosicrucis. That was 1614. It just dramatically announced, hey, there's this secret brotherhood dedicated to divine wisdom.
Wow, okay. Just drop that out there.
Pretty much. Then, 1615, you get the Confessio Fraternitatis. This one was more of an appeal, calling on scholars, rulers, the influential people to join them in a universal reformation.
A call to action.
Exactly. And then 1616, the Chemische Hochzeit Christiani Rosenkreuz, or the chemical wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz. This one's different. It's this highly symbolic alchemical romance, like an allegorical initiation journey.
And these manifestos, they famously introduced this founder figure, Christian Rosenkreuz. Kind of mythical, right? What was his story and what was the big idea they were pushing, the core promise?
Right. The legend paints him as this German mystic, an alchemist, supposedly born way back in 1378.
Wow.
Traveled to the Middle East, learned ancient wisdom, founded the order in the 15th century, and supposedly lived to be 106.
Quite the lifespan.
And the story goes, his tomb was rediscovered much later, full of secret texts and artifacts.
Okay, so that's the legend, but the core promise, what were they actually selling?
In a nutshell, a complete overhaul of humanity, of society. I mean, imagine a brotherhood claiming they've mastered everything.
Like what?
Unlocking universal knowledge, the secrets of nature, real alchemy transmuting metals, maybe even the soul, curing all illness, extending life, maybe indefinitely.
So not small claims then?
Not at all. Their ultimate vision was this radical spiritual and intellectual revolution to bring about a new, enlightened era for everyone, completely bypassing the existing powers, the church, the state. Hugely ambitious.
It really is. But for a group claiming all that power, they were famously elusive. That seems like a contradiction. How did they invite people to join without actually being findable?
Yeah, that's the absolute core of their mystique, isn't it? They literally declare themselves hidden yet accessible.
How does that work?
They invited sincere seekers to communicate, maybe through thoughts or publications, but gave no address, no contact person. This deliberate elusiveness, it was key. And crucially, our sources show no actual visible Rosicrucian order with like a headquarters popped up immediately after the manifestos.
So how did people react back then? What was the impact in Europe? This invisible brotherhood just appears in print.
It caused a massive stir. You have to remember the time period, intense religious upheaval, The Reformation was ongoing, the 30 Years' War was looming, and the dawn of the scientific revolution.
A whole lot going on.
Exactly. So it really appealed to scholars, scientists, mystics, people looking for new answers, new truths beyond the old dogmas.
So people tried to find them.
Oh, definitely. Lots of genuine seekers tried to make contact.
Yeah.
But it also led to hoaxes. People claiming to be Rosicrucians and imitation groups popping up all over the place. Confusion reigned.
And these ideas, they didn't just vanish, right? They influenced other groups later on, maybe like the Freemasons.
Absolutely. The influence on later esoteric traditions is undeniable, especially, as you say, on various rites of Freemasonry. The Rosicrucian degree is a very clear example.
Right.
And scholars still debate it today. Was it a real secret society? A philosophical allegory? A satire? Just a blueprint for an intellectual movement? We don't have a definitive answer.
And that ambiguity.
That's the fertile ground. If they claim such power and remained hidden, well, the conspiratorial imagination just runs wild. What was their real agenda? And that leads us right into the conspiracy theory itself.
Okay, so that sets the stage. Fascinating history, full of mystery. But now let's get into how this morphed into something darker, more unsettling. Part 2. The core conspiracy, secret knowledge, and global manipulation.
Yeah, this is where it gets really speculative.
The theory basically says the Rosicrucians aren't just historical figures or philosophers, there's something else entirely. What's the central chilling claim here?
The core claim, according to the proponents of this theory, is that the Rosicrucians, or maybe a hidden inner core, are an ancient, incredibly powerful, and totally clandestine elite.
An elite who possess what?
Not just philosophical ideas, but real world-changing knowledge. And they've used this knowledge secretly to exert profound influence over history, over global events. They're seen as the puppet masters.
Manipulating things from behind the curtain.
Exactly. Mastering forbidden sciences, real alchemy, advanced physics may be lost from Atlantis, radical life extension, understanding the fundamental laws of reality, and using all that to secretly steer politics, finance, science, even culture, all for their own ends.
Okay, let's unpack that secret knowledge. You mentioned alchemy. What does that mean in this context?
Well, it's twofold, really. Material and spiritual. Proponents believe they actually achieved the philosopher's stone.
The thing that turns lead into gold.
That's the material side, yes. Transmuting elements, generating limitless wealth. This allows them to fund their hidden operations, influence economies without any oversight. It ties right into that whole alchemical elite conspiracy idea.
Okay, and the spiritual side?
That's about inner transformation, but they also talk about the elixir of life.
Immortality, or something close to it.
Exactly. Radical life extension, maybe functional immortality. This lets key members live for centuries. Imagine the knowledge they could accumulate, the long-term plans they could execute, maintaining leadership across generations. That connects directly to the immortals among us kind of theory.
Wow, gold and long life. But you said it wasn't just that.
Right. There's also the spiritual alchemy, the magnum opus, the great work. This isn't just about the soul's perfection for its own sake. It's believed to give them higher consciousness, enhanced intuition, maybe even the ability to subtly influence reality itself.
That sounds almost like cosmic power, a deep understanding of how everything works.
Precisely. And it extends beyond alchemy. They're also thought to possess knowledge of lost sciences or ancient technologies.
Like Atlantis stuff, flying machines, free energy.
Things like that, yes.
Yeah.
Advanced physics, maybe technologies from lost civilizations that could totally revolutionize our world energy, transport, communication, but they keep it suppressed, blocked away.
Why?
We'll get to the motives, but it's a part of the control. And beyond tech, they're said to understand the true laws of the universe, the fundamental spiritual, energetic laws governing reality.
Like allowing them to do what?
To subtly manipulate events, human psychology, maybe even the flow of history itself, like cosmic chess players.
Okay, so if they have all this power, this knowledge, who are they, these Rosicrucian elite? How are they structured? How do they operate?
Well, the theory often suggests a core group, maybe from ancient bloodlines, who inherit these secrets or are initiated into them.
Born into it.
Sometimes, yeah. But beyond that core, the big claim is systematic infiltration, getting their people into positions of power across all sectors of society.
Like where specifically?
Governments, politics manipulating laws, foreign policy from the inside, Financial institutions controlling economies, central banks, maybe using that alchemical wealth or just superior insight.
It sounds all-encompassing. Does it go into science and culture too?
Oh, absolutely. They're supposedly embedded in scientific and academic institutions, shaping the scientific narrative, suppressing inconvenient truths about alchemy, free energy, maybe alternative history, directing research where they want it to go while pursuing the really advanced stuff in secret.
And media, arts.
Yes, influencing public opinion, shaping culture, social norms through subtle propaganda, maybe hidden messages in art or entertainment. The idea is their influence is like an invisible hand. You feel the effects, but you don't see the hand moving. It's masked by what looks like normal historical chaos or market forces.
It paints a pretty terrifying picture. Why? Why would they do all this? Conceal knowledge, exert control? What are the motives proponents point to? Because it sounds pretty nefarious.
It does raise that question, doesn't it? The motives vary depending on the version of the theory, but some core ideas come up often. One is simply maintaining absolute power.
Makes sense. Immortality and infinite wealth would give you ultimate power.
Exactly. And revealing those secrets, that would completely disrupt the global power balance. It might empower the masses, lead to chaos from their perspective, threaten their control. So keep it secret.
What about resources? You mentioned alchemy.
Right, resource monopolization. If anyone could make gold, the monetary system collapses. If free energy exists, the current energy giants, the power structures built on fossil fuels, become obsolete. So they suppress it to maintain dominance through engineered scarcity.
Is there a more spiritual or even sinister angle to the motive?
Often, yes. Some theories talk about spiritual slavery, actively suppressing humanity's spiritual growth or enlightenment, keeping the masses, asleep, ignorant of their own potential so they can't challenge the elite's control.
That sounds really dark.
It can tie into even darker ideas, sometimes connecting to things like the Archon control theory, the idea of non-human entities subtly manipulating us. But a slightly less malevolent, though still controlling view, is that they see themselves as darkly benevolent guides. Meaning they believe humanity just isn't ready for these truths, that we destroy ourselves, so they have to secretly guide our evolution, control progress, suppress dangerous knowledge, all for our own good, supposedly. But it's still immense, undemocratic power.
Okay. Immense power, deep secrets, complex motives. Now the big question, what do proponents actually point to as evidence for all this? Because, let's be honest, it sounds pretty fantastical.
It does, and the evidence is usually indirect, interpretive, circumstantial. It's not like there's a leaked Rosicrucian memo detailing global control plans.
Right, so what do they say?
Okay, first big one. Persistent and ubiquitous use of hidden symbolism. This is huge for proponents.
What kind of symbols?
Classic Rosicrucian symbols, the rose and cross, obviously. But also things like the eye in the pyramid, certain alchemical symbols, esoteric geometry, specific numbers. They claim these appear again and again in unexpected places.
Like where? I know people point to the US dollar bill.
Exactly. The pyramid, the all-seeing eye. Also corporate logos, sometimes government building architecture like Washington, D.C., or even the Vatican works of art throughout history.
And the interpretation isn't just coincidence or artistic choice?
Not for proponents, no. They see it as a deliberate signature, a hidden message for other initiates saying, we are here. A subtle way of showing they're everywhere, in control, almost a ritualistic display of their hidden power.
Okay, symbolism. What else? You mentioned connections to other groups earlier, like Freemasons.
Yes, connections to other powerful secret societies. Proponents stress the undeniable historical influence Rosicrucian ideas had on Freemasonry, and later groups often linked in conspiracy theories, like the Bavarian Illuminati.
And many famous Masons had Rosicrucian interests, right?
They did. So the conspiracy interpretation takes this historical link and stretches it. Either Rosicrucianism is the ultimate secret society, the umbrella group controlling the others. Or its inner circle, the real Rosicrucians, are the hidden masters pulling the strings of groups like the Masons or Illuminati. The masters of the craft, so to speak.
Okay. And what about those wild claims? The longevity, the wealth, people like the Count of Saint Germain.
Yep, alleged longevity and unexplained wealth of historical figures. Figures like Saint Germain, often linked to Rosicrucian or alchemical circles, are held up as examples. His supposed agelessness, his mysterious wealth.
Proponents see that as proof.
As direct evidence, yes. Proof that the elixir of life and alchemical gold are real and achieved by the elite. And these long lives, they argue, are essential for maintaining that continuous, multi-generational control.
Does this connect to actual historical events, revolutions, big societal shifts?
They try to make those connections. That's another category of evidence, looking at historical events and revolutions. They'll point to subtle links, maybe esoteric influences or key figures involved, connecting Rosicrucians to big shifts like the Protestant Reformation, the Enlightenment, the American or French revolutions.
Seeing them as the hidden hand guiding these huge changes.
Precisely, nudging history along their grand long-term plan while staying hidden behind the public movements and figures. It suggests that major historical turning points weren't accidental or purely driven by the masses.
It's a way to find order in chaos, I suppose, even if it's a sinister order.
It definitely offers that. And related to that is the hidden wisdom of great minds. Proponents highlight that many scientific giants, Isaac Newton, Robert Boyle, Francis Bacon, were deeply interested in alchemy, hermeticism, esotericism.
Which were linked to Rosicrucian thought.
Right, so the conspiracy take is, these pioneers weren't just dabbling. They were either initiated or influenced by suppressed Rosicrucian knowledge. Their real breakthroughs came from these hidden sources, not just mainstream thinking. And the fact that their esoteric interests are often downplayed by historians, that's seen as part of the cover-up.
Interesting. Okay, one more area they point to. How society has changed, maybe regarding religion.
Yes, the undermining of traditional religion in society. Some proponents claim the rise of secularism, scientific materialism, even New Age spirituality, which they sometimes accuse Rosicrucians of subtly promoting, has deliberately eroded traditional power structures, especially established religions.
As part of their plan.
Exactly. This gradual shift is seen as part of the Rosicrucian agenda. Dismantle the old systems they find restrictive or outdated, and reshape society towards a new order that they ultimately control.
Okay, so that's the case for the conspiracy, according to its believers. Symbolism, connections, mysterious figures, hidden hands in history, suppressed knowledge. But now we need to balance this. Let's get into part 4. The mainstream view, the debunking. How do historians and academics see all this?
Well, if you look at the broad academic consensus, it's pretty clear. Mainstream scholars overwhelmingly dismiss the Rosicrucian global control conspiracy theory as unfounded speculation.
So how do they view early Rosicrucianism?
Primarily as an intellectual and spiritual movement. Our research confirms manifestos were most likely, philosophical statements, maybe satire, maybe an allegory calling for a new way of thinking in that era of change. An invisible college of minds.
Influential, yes, but not actually controlling events.
Exactly. They definitely influenced thought, inspired people, but there's no credible evidence they ever held the kind of centralized global power the conspiracy claims.
What about that idea of a single unified order?
History just doesn't support it. There's no evidence of one monolithic Rosicrucian order pulling strings globally for centuries. What we do see historically are numerous independent Rosicrucian-inspired fraternities and groups forming over time, often with different goals, limited reach, more like philosophical clubs than a secret world government.
Okay, and all that symbolism they point to everywhere. The dollar bill, the logos.
That's a really key point for debunking. Symbolism is incredibly fluid. Symbols get borrowed, reinterpreted, used by many different groups throughout history for many different reasons.
So the Masons using a symbol also found in Rosicrucianism doesn't mean the Rosicrucians control the Masons?
Not at all. It more likely reflects shared interests as esoteric philosophy or just cultural borrowing of common symbols from that period. Seeing these symbols everywhere and assuming a single hidden hand, that often comes down to pattern seeking.
Like seeing faces in clouds.
Exactly. Psychologists call it pareidolia or epiphania. Our brain's tendency to find meaningful patterns in random noise. Confirmation bias plays a huge role too. If you believe the Rosicrucians are everywhere, you'll start seeing their signs everywhere.
Right. Now, what about the core claims? Alchemy, immortality. How does science view those?
Well, modern chemistry actually grew out of alchemy, but the literal claims, turning lead into gold, the elixir of life for immortality, they remain firmly in the realm of pseudoscience.
No scientific proof.
None whatsoever. And those stories of figures like Saint Germain, the unexplained wealth or longevity, it usually turns out to be exaggeration, myth-making, or explainable by conventional means like inheritance or powerful patrons, not magic potions.
Okay. So Isaac Newton studying alchemy doesn't mean he got secret Rosicrucian knowledge.
It means he was a man of his time. Many brilliant minds back then explored esoteric ideas alongside what we now call science. The lines were blurrier. It shows influence, intellectual curiosity, absolutely. but it's a huge leap to say it proves direct, manipulative control or secret knowledge transfer from a hidden order.
So influence, not control.
Precisely. And there's also just no evidence of knowledge suppression. Proponents claim the Rosicrucians had revolutionary tech or science that was seized or hidden. But where's the proof?
You mean the texts themselves?
Yeah, the original Rosicrucian manifestos, the later writings, they're not suppressed. They're publicly available, studied by scholars. There's no evidence of governments raiding Rosicrucian archives and locking away secrets of free energy or immortality.
And just the sheer scale of it all, keeping that big a secret for centuries.
It beggars belief, frankly. The logistical impossibility is a major counterargument. Think about maintaining a global conspiracy involving immortality, alchemy, control over governments, finance, science. Through centuries of wars, revolutions, technological change, the internet.
Leaks would be inevitable.
You'd think so. Catastrophic leaks, internal conflicts, undeniable traces. The complete lack of concrete evidence is telling. You often see how this specific theory just bundles together other conspiracy theories. Freemasons, Illuminati, New World Order, alchemical elite, immortals. It becomes this grand unified conspiracy, which actually makes its specific claims about Rosicrucians weaker, less focused.
Okay, so lots of reasons from a mainstream perspective to be highly skeptical, to say the least. But despite all that, the theory persists. It has real staying power. So let's move to our final part. Why? Why does this Rosicrucian global control idea endure? What makes it so sticky?
It really taps into some deep-seated human interests and anxieties, I think. First off, there's just the fundamental allure of secret societies.
We just love the idea of hidden knowledge and power.
Exactly. Groups operating behind the scenes, knowing things we don't.
Yeah.
The Rosicrucians, with their mysterious origins, are like the perfect template for that fascination.
And it offers an explanation for things.
Yes. Explaining history's complexity. Global events often seem chaotic, random, frighteningly complex. A theory like this offers a simple, compelling narrative. It's not chaos, there's an unseen intelligence, a hidden hand guiding it all. Even a malevolent hand can feel less chaotic than pure randomness.
It provides a sense of order, even if it's a disturbing one.
Right, and it plugs directly into a very modern, very pervasive distrust of elites and power structures.
The belief that the people at the top are secretive and self-serving.
Precisely. This theory just gives that feeling a name and a history. It confirms the suspicion that powerful elites are operating in secret, pulling strings for their own benefit, not ours.
And the knowledge aspect, the promise of secrets.
That's a huge draw. The promise of hidden knowledge, the idea that profound, world-changing truths, alchemy, immortality, the secrets of the universe are out there but being withheld. That's incredibly attractive, especially if you feel let down or unfulfilled by mainstream science or spirituality.
And all that symbolism we talked about earlier must feed into it constantly.
Absolutely. The truth in symbolism keeps it alive. People love decoding things, finding hidden meanings. The widespread use of esoteric symbols gives proponents a never-ending stream of clues to find and interpret, which constantly reinforces their belief. Confirmation bias again.
Yeah, you see it everywhere once you start looking for it.
And for some, particularly spiritual seekers, there's the quest for universal truth. The Rosicrucians promised a synthesis of science, spirituality, ancient wisdom. The idea that they hold the key to that ultimate understanding is incredibly appealing.
It connects to a kind of archetype too, doesn't it?
It does. The archetype of the magician scientist, or the enlightened sage, someone who bridges the gap between mysticism and rational inquiry, philosophy, and science. That resonates with a deep desire many people have for a more holistic, unified understanding of reality. This theory gives that archetype a secret, powerful reality.
So, to wrap up then, the Rosicrucian global control and suppressed knowledge conspiracy theory, it really does take this elusive ancient brotherhood and spins it into a pretty chilling story. Hidden power, global manipulation.
Yeah, the core claims. Secret alchemical knowledge, achieving radical longevity, understanding the deep laws of the universe, and using all of it to secretly shape history, control wealth, keep the rest of us, well, maybe in the dark.
Well, as we've discussed, mainstream history and academia see it very differently. An influential philosophical movement, sure, but no global control. And literal alchemy, immortality dismissed as pseudoscience based on the evidence we have.
Right, but the conspiracy theory itself, it clearly endures. Its power comes from tapping into those deep things we talked about. Fascination with secrets, distrust of elites, the yearning for hidden truths that explain a complicated world.
So as we finish this deep dive, thinking about the unseen forces that might or might not shape our world, it leaves you wondering about those symbols. The rose and the cross.
Are they just symbols?
Yeah.
Spiritual ideals? Or could they represent something more? A hidden power, operating in the shadows, maybe shaping our destiny without us even knowing, keeping the biggest secrets to themselves.
The truth. Well, for now, it seems shrouded in historical mystery and modern speculation. But that captivating what if about the Rosicrucians, it definitely continues to echo, doesn't it? Especially in the corridors of power, real or imagined.